Yep.
Okay, so human communities of all time had to solve the problem of social order, and this always involved solving disputes, right? Um, as we as we always mention the how this story went for the ancient Athenians. So they had this very specific method for doing trials. They had this token called Pinakion that was like an ID, bronze plate like this size, and they of the court. They went to the court, and then they put each of them put this plague into a slot in this machine called Kleroterion. So the word Kleros means randomness in Greek. So, and then came some like official from the justice system and threw some black and white dice, 20 faces dice on the side on a tube, and then if you had um, on your row you had a white dice, then you went to the jury, and if you had a black dice, you went home and you were not selected. So this was an allotment method that they devised in order not to have people like attacking their justice system, right? Just so people could not take their friends to be jurors in their popular trials. So this is what they saw as a justice system in the ancient Athens. Then we move forward a bit. We have the Middle Ages, and if you were accused of witchcraft in the Middle Ages, you had to go through this ordeal trial, and where they just threw into the water in the river, and if you floated, it meant that you were a witch because the water didn't want to receive you, and then you went. They took you out and they put you on. Yeah, you were burnt at the stake, basically. And if you went down in the river, that meant that your soul was pure, and then that you were not guilty. That didn't have much consequence at that point, but that was how they did it in the Middle Ages for witchcraft trials. Um, and in the Middle Ages, so when the traders of the time they travel from one fair to the other to trade their goods and stuff. And if they had disputes, they didn't want to have these disputes adjudicated by a priest or a state official, a state judge, who were not very knowledgeable about trade disputes, right? So they developed a different rule set called the lex mercatoria, or the law merchant. So this was a code of private law that was under use by merchant in the Middle Ages. And one of the key aspects of this lex mercatoria was that merchant disputes were resolved by fellow merchants, not by a priest and not by a government judge. They Because they thought that the best way to solve a trade dispute, a commercial dispute, was having other tradesmen doing the analysis of who was right and who wasn't. So because they knew how the trade worked, right? So these were very early ideas of what we call, like, if you want, peer-to-peer justice. The Athenians had this idea of every citizen having the right to participate in trials as juries, which was incorporated into the U.S. Constitution. And Tocqueville, when he visited America from France, one of the things he most admired of the U.S. system was particularly the fact that that jurors were drawn from the citizens, right, and not they were not like some aristocratic judges that had nothing to do with the rest of the people. And so the lex mercatoria also was based on the principle that judgment had to be done by peers, right? The ideas of the existing current like justice systems come states consolidate, and that's when we get all these lawyers and judges and all these like bureaucratic states, which they were great, and this worked for a long time, providing rule of law in the countries which were able to develop rule of law, of course. Uh, but then the problem is that this system started to show the cracks in the late 20th century because of technology changes, the fact of the internet, the fact of connectivity, the fact of globalization. So in a real-time global world, lots of the legacy systems start to not work anymore, right? Um, um, Back then in the 1990s, Nick Szabo comes with this idea of smart contracts. So he says, no, the economy is changing. So we are going to e-commerce online transactions world, excellence for most of the transactions. And so this concept of smart contracts was about digitally enforceable contracts. His early idea did not include blockchain because this was in the 90s, so there was no blockchain. Smart contracts, when Szabo thought about this for the first time, they could be coded into like a centralized server, basically, and it was a digital contract that parties could agree on this server, and it worked there. As you know, Satoshi Nakamoto brings us blockchain, Bitcoin, and blockchain underlying technology in 2008, and the idea that we can have a decentralized network of computers where consensus can be used for a monetary system, and Vitalik and the team behind Ethereum generalized this idea into the fact that you a network, right? So what is this bringing? This basically, as we mentioned once and again, this brings the fact because the smart contracts coded into a blockchain are going to self-execute as they are coded in the blockchain, and no one can arbitrarily change this, right? And no owner of the system has exclusive key to the console where he can like change jurors or manipulate it. Smart contracts, as we mentioned in the first talk of the conference, so they are smart enough to self-execute as coded, but they are not smart enough to solve situations where there is ambiguity and there is the necessity of interpretation. And this is where human interventions is going to be required. So we discussed lots of different aspects of this new type of dispute resolution system. Jose Luis spoke about crowd law and how people are becoming more involved and participating more closely into creating policies. We'll discuss how this new institution called Kleros can be used for curation in compliance and in the DeFi, decentralized finance ecosystem. Winter discussed a bit of the challenges regarding the mechanism design that Kleros is based on. Then we had a really good panel discussing different use cases of Kleros in different aspects. As we always say, Kleros is a tool that can be used for lots of different use cases. And the team members, we don't even know what these use cases are. We know only some of them, but Mauricio discussed energy, peer-to-peer energy disputes. We had also Abir discussing domain name disputes, and Luis discussing commercial contracts in the context, for example, of Venezuela or countries that don't have a good justice system because of different reasons. Then we had another panel moderated by Sophie with William O'Rourke and Jose Torres and myself discussing the fairness and legal considerations of decentralized justice. And finally, a short presentation of the Kleros Maker Fellowship that we are doing with the Maker Foundation, which, by the way, applications are still open until Monday. So if you want to spend the weekend preparing your application, you can still do it. And then today we started with Clément, who presented a bit of the products of Kleros and how the system works. Then we had a really cool panel about the oracles and prediction markets with Clément, with Edmund and Alex from Gnosis. And then we went to discuss some of the research challenges in decentralized justice that, well, William tackles every day in his research, and how to prevent attacks and make the system more secure, more efficient. Then we discuss a bit more about curation and the DApp curate that was developed in order for enabling anyone to make a decentralized list for curation of content, any type of content. Then we had Santi discussing the different alternatives for validating humans on the blockchain. Enrique discussed this a bit more, and especially presenting how Kleros thinks about this issue and the proof of humanity work that we have been developing, the proof of humanity app that he has been developing. Then we just launched the Linguo app, so you can start translating stuff right away if you want. This is already on the Ethereum mainnet. Go and use it. And then a bit of review of the truth solver that anyone can use for creating any type of dispute that can be adjudicated by Kleros. So basically what we are working on is new governance models for the new types of community that are coming in the coming years, which are going to be mostly online. And Kleros is only a part of this. You know, if you want to learn a lot more of new governance models, well, you can, of course, go to this very good book, The Radical Markets, by Eric Posner and Glenn Weil. Santi also mentioned this. So this is what this discuss now, what new types of representation or new types of democracy, or what should the governance look like in a world of bots, in a world of deep fakes, in a world of networks, in a world where boundaries are not necessarily that important anymore. And the best proof of this is like us doing this conference together online, and the Kleros team, for example, being composed by people from different, I don't know, like 10 countries, I guess. And I'm in Argentina, I see Farid there is in Turkey, Enrique is in Brazil. So this is a new world that we live in, and this is a world that requires new governance structures, because the existing governance structures for this world, it's called either like Facebook or some private platform where people interact, and this platform owns everything about the people who like use the platform, basically. So this is in this context, we are seeing the rise of a new type of legal system that some people call the lex cryptographica, and it's rules that are being encoded in cryptographic protocols that cannot be broken, or cannot be easily broken, at least. And this is the legal system that Kleros is working to build on. And finally, for a short summary of the main ideas that are involved in decentralized justice, and this is the end, so you can go eat. This is based on secure systems built on blockchain. You know how Kleros works and how any decentralized system should work is blockchain technology. No one can tamper with this. No one owns it. It's the community who owns it, basically. This is what gives decentralized justice the rule of law feature. They are based on communities and collective intelligence, and we have reviewed in different talks how this works, and we have discussed this with Jose Luis, and we have discussed this with prediction market as well. And of course, with new incentive systems, with Eyal, Winter discussed, and William, and how this crypto economic system can work a bit about to produce rule of law for this new digital age that we are going into. And if you like zoom out a bit and see number of different legacy institutions are being transformed by the digital world, and there is first one stage where there is a version of the previous technology that is kind of the digital version, but like doing the same that the previous one, but like digital. You know, that's what Encarta did with Britannica, what PayPal did with banks, and like what Modria did with Kurs in some way. They're just replicating the logic of working of the old institution into the digital realm. And what's coming is, of course, all of this power being put in the hands of communities, and this is what Wikipedia did in Encyclopedia Business, and Bitcoin is doing to financial institutions, and Bitcoin crypto in general, and Kleros will help do into the central solution realm. So that's it for me. Thank you very much for joining the conference, and I will let Clement give the final words. And and greet you all. And it was a pleasure, and I'm sure that you're very, very tired now. And so hopefully next one will be in person with live, so we can see in the eye. Clement, please, you can close the conference.
So thanks everyone for coming to the conference. I hope you've seen nice example of application rely on Kleros and the few development we've made in the previous year. As we know, well, we are online, so that's a bit of a strange format, but that can also allow for more time, in particular for people in the hackathon. They now have a 4-day hackathon, and we are the conference is over, but the hackathon is still running. So even if you did not start yet, you can also try to make a project, even if it's just 2 days, but you can try. You don't have anything to lose. So thanks everyone for coming. Don't hesitate to get in contact with us on Telegram. You can also send mail if you want some integration with Kleros. We are very happy to help. And we're gonna close the conference. And thank you, Federico. Thank you, Damian, and thank you all of the speakers and organizers.